So one of the most common questions I get is, how do I buy a new computer? Well, it's not an easy question to answer. It all depends on what you're going to be using the computer for. Are you going to be using it for email, surfing the internet, maybe processing some Word, Excel documents? Are you going to be using QuickBooks? Are you in an office environment? Are you going to be using it for gaming? There are a lot of factors that go into how you decide what kind of computer to buy. So I have a few things to tell you. First of all, I'm going to tell you a story. I went shopping today to Best Buy. I needed to pick up a computer for a customer of mine who is in a office environment, sort of. But it was the computer is for business use. So knowing that, I went to Best Buy, and the customer had a budget in mind, and the budget was kind of on the low end. So I go to Best Buy, and I know what I'm looking for. I know what kind of processor I want. I know how much memory I want. But the big factor for the office environment is we're going to plug the computer into a wired network, meaning it's going to get its internet access from a cable rather than Wi-Fi. With that said, the network cards in computers come in different speeds. The most popular, and what every computer should have these days, is a gigabit network card. Then the next step below that, which is what we used to use in the last century, was a megabit network card. So they come in 100 megabits per second or 1,000 megabits per second, which is your gigabit. So I've run across several computers lately that have megabit network cards. I mean, and these are computers that customers have bought recently, and they have old technology in them. And they plug them into their router, and they wonder why their internet experience is so slow. So I wanted a computer with a gigabit network card in it. I was looking at all the desktop computers because I was just going to buy the tower computer. I was looking at all of those, and nowhere on any of the specs did it say what the speed was of the network card. So I flagged down the closest Best Buy salesperson in the computer department and asked him that question. You know, I'm looking at, this computer and that computer over there. I've got two that I want to choose from. Can you tell me the speed of the network card? He proceeded to tell me the speed of the Wi-Fi. And I said, well, that's great, but I'm looking for the onboard network card, the one that I plug the wire into. What is the speed? And he kind of looked at me with a strange look on his face as if he didn't know what I was talking about. Now, I know most people use Wi-Fi these days, but in a business environment, the wired connection is king. You're not going to use Wi-Fi in a business environment, for the most part anyway. So he looked all through the specs, and he was just kind of dumbfounded, and I finally said, maybe you can direct me to somebody who can help me. So he said, well, let me go get somebody from the Geek Squad. So I'm thinking, okay, whatever. So pretty soon he comes back with a 16-year-old from the Geek Squad. And she at least had a little bit more on the ball than he did, and she knew how to find her way around the computer. The problem was I could have found my way into the specs of the computer to see what the specs were of the gigabit network, or of the network card, but they had it locked down. I couldn't get into any of the administrative areas without an administrator password. So she didn't have that either, so she really couldn't tell me the speed. So I ended up pulling out my iPad, and I put it on a shelf, and I went to the Best Buy website, and I looked up the computer that I wanted, and I looked up the specs, and on the website they have the specs. It's a gigabit network card. I had, at one point in time while I was in Best Buy today, I had 3 Geek Squad people standing around me, and 2 out of the 3 didn't even know what an onboard network card was. So with that said, when you're going to go buy a computer, you have to be really careful about what you do, and you have to go armed with knowledge. When you go shopping, you have to know what it is you're shopping for. I actually watched one of the Best Buy salespeople kind of direct somebody to a computer that was kind of on the low end, and I knew it wouldn't be a good computer for them, and I kind of stepped in and interjected my two cents there. So the Geek Squad guy probably wasn't too happy with me. But anyway, with all of that said, my point for that story is that you really need to go shopping armed with knowledge. So the first thing that you want to think about when you're buying a new computer, first of all, what are you going to do with it? Like I said, email, internet surfing. You really don't need a really fast computer, but you want to get the fastest you can afford. So then you're going to start factoring in, okay, now I'm going to have multiple windows open, maybe some Word documents, Excel documents. I'm going to be working in QuickBooks. I'm going to have 5 internet windows open. I'm going to be surfing between various sites. I might want to be listening to music, streaming music. There's a lot of people out there who do all of that at the same time. I'm one of them. So with that said, the first thing you want to take a look at is the processor. There are 2 different flavors of processors. There's AMD and there's Intel. Those are the manufacturers of the processors. AMD is a good processor, but it's not the processor you want to be purchasing if you're going to be doing heavy-duty work on the computer, especially if you're going to be doing any graphics work. There is a reason why Apple only puts Intel processors in their computers. It's because Intel has the beefier processor and is designed for that type of work. So with that said, I always recommend an Intel processor. When it comes to Intel processors, you're going to see several different flavors out there. You're probably going to see the Celeron, which is a very old processor. You're going to see the Pentium, again, which is an old processor, although I think they've kind of, trotted that back out and refreshed it and put it in some brand new computers, but it's still a very low-end processor. Then you want to take a look at the Intel Core i3, i5, or i7. Those are the latest processors, and right now they are on the 5th generation. I think that was just released. So with that said, you want to make sure that if you're going to get an Intel i3, i5, or i7 processor, you want to make sure it's at least the 4th generation. You don't want to be purchasing a 3rd, 2nd, or 1st generation processor. You're going to see those processors in some computers. For instance, if you go to Best Buy, you might see a computer on the shelf for $250. I saw one of those today. It had extremely old technology in it. So those computers that are in the $250 to maybe $350, $400 range, it's going to be very old technology. You're probably 5 years into the technology. So you get what you pay for, is that adage. So Core i3, Core i5, or Core i7 processors from Intel. The i3 is the slowest of the processors, or the lowest of the rung of the processors. i5 is a really good processor. In fact, this computer right here, this laptop, has an i5 processor on it. I think it's probably 3rd generation. This laptop is 2 years old, I think. So, and then the i7 is going to be the fastest processor. So I usually try and recommend, unless you're just doing email and maybe going to 1 or 2 websites, you can use the i3 processor. But if you're going to be doing anything more than that, I really recommend stepping it up to the Intel Core i5 processor, at least the 4th generation. So that's your first consideration. Your second consideration is going to be your memory. And I've shown you this before on videos. This is a memory chip for a laptop. I would recommend, if you're buying either a laptop or a desktop, that you get at least 8 gigs of memory. Memory is a chip that is used to store temporary information, programs that you have open, data that you have open. The minute you shut the computer down, this chip is wiped clean. On the flip side, your hard drives is where all your data is stored. This is actually an SSD hard drive, which stands for solid state device. It has no moving parts. Solid state drives are extremely fast. As opposed to traditional hard drives in your laptops or computers, they are not going to be as fast as a solid state drive. So I'll give you a story. About 3 years ago, about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, I bought a MacBook. And I struggled with it for maybe 6 months to a year. And the speed just wasn't good enough. So I finally took out the traditional hard drive and put in a solid state drive, just like this. took the traditional drive and put it in place of the DVD drive. The super drive is what they call them in the MacBook. And so my solid state drive has all of my operating system and my apps on it. And the computer went from a boot time of 2 minutes to, I'd say, 15 seconds. This MacBook is super, super fast just because I have a solid state drive in it. So if you're looking for speed, you want to make sure you get the best processor you can, the fastest processor you can, the largest amount of RAM that you could possibly afford, and a solid state drive. But if you're the typical user, you don't need all of that. You know, the Intel Core i5 processor, at least the 4th generation, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and really any size of a hard drive in the computer, if it's a traditional hard drive, it's, you know, whatever you get in there is going to be sufficient. You're probably going to get nothing less than a terabyte of hard drive space, which is more than enough room to store anything you need to put in there unless you're filming videos daily like I am. And then solid state drives are typically smaller than traditional hard drives. So you want to make sure that you get one that's large enough for your needs. I would recommend, if you're going solid state, to get at least 256 gigs. Then you're looking at a little bit more money. So there you have it, my tips on purchasing a computer. And if you have any questions, you know where to reach me, Mary@computerdiva.biz. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great day.